What's up everybody, it's Scapegoat here, and in this tutorial we are going to be concluding our Odin 2 series. We are going to be going over the modulation matrix, the arpeggiator, and the global settings. So without further ado, let's get started. So moving on down to the modulation matrix, it can look a little bit intimidating at first, but it's actually just repeating the same options multiple times all the way down. And so it's essentially just duplicating it. And so if we actually look at, say, the top, you see that we have both a modulation source and we have two destinations. Your modulation source, which you can choose from a bunch of different sources on the synth, say like an LFO. And you can send it to a destination. So for example, I might want the LFO to modulate the cutoff frequency. So you would set filter 1 frequency. Say you want a second destination. I also want it to the LFO to modulate the amplitude envelope. Say, well, let's say the filter envelope. Let's say like the attack or something like that. You could do that as well. And that you can do multiple times all the way down. And in the middle here, what you have are these little, where you see the zeros. The first zero over here, from going from left to right, that's going to be your destination 1 amount, which is going to control how much the source modulates destination 1. It can be positive or negative. You also have a destination 2 amount in the middle here, and that works just like the first one. You can go positive or negative. It's essentially an independent second modulation destination with identical features. And then after that, you have your scaling over here, which is that third zero. And so modulation scale essentially is more of an advanced feature of the modulation matrix in Odin 2. And so it allows you to scale the modulation that was set up with those parameters above by another modulation source. One of the ways you could see the modulation scale is essentially it selects which modulation source is being used to scale those modulations. And then that will be done by an amount. And so when you click on scale, you have different modulation sources you can use to scale. And then you have that amount that you can scale by just dragging up and down. It works both in the negative direction too, just like the other ones. You can go up or down. Something else to cover is you have mono and poly modulation. So some of the modulation sources and destinations within this synth are going to be polyphonic, while there's others that are just monophonic. So the polyphonic ones are going to exist once per voice. Now the other ones are going to be more monophonic, and those are going to exist once per plugin instance. And so I have a table here that's from the TheWaveWarden official guide. I think that is page 57. And this similar logic is going to apply when you're dealing with the poly-mono modulation scaling as well. In both section 7.4 and 7.5 of the official guide, you're given modulation sources and you're given modulation destinations, which I highly suggest just checking them out. You can also just mess around on the synth as well, but if you really want like an organized list of everything, 7.4 and 7.5 on the official TheWaveWarden guide will give you those lists. It'll also let you know whether those sources are polyphonic or monophonic. Next, after that, we are going to be moving over to the arpeggiator section. And so with the arpeggiator section, you have a power button here. You can turn the arpeggiator on and off. Then you have the step time next to that, which controls the time one step takes, and it's synced to the BPM on your host, DAW, or whatever software you have it loaded up into. Then you have your octaves, so you can choose from different octave ranges. Then you have your ARP direction, so you can go in various different directions, up, down, and then you have up, down, or down, up, random, crawl up, crawl down. This is something you might want to more experiment with when you're making your sound. Your arpeggiator steps, which is going to correspond to how many steps you want in the arpeggiator. You also have a gate length, and the gate length is essentially going to control how long the note is played before a note off signal is sent to the synthesizer. You can essentially, if you have a longer gate length, say it's at 50% and you bump it up to like 70, it's essentially going to create overlap within the steps. So you can use this for a lot of different creative purposes and things like that. Or if you want to be more precise, you could turn it down to like 20%. It really just depends on the sound you're making and the melody that the arpeggiator is playing. Then over here you see these little buttons here that can be enabled, the little square buttons. They kind of remind me of FL Studio. Those are gonna basically control the steps. So what you could do is you can turn the steps in the sequence on or off, and that's how you could start creating little rhythmic patterns and things like that. You have a one-shot mode, which when enabled is going to only play the sequence once. So if you don't want the ARP to loop around, you can make sure that one shot is enabled. And then you have some arpeggiator modulation. You have 2 rows here, and they're essentially freely definable modulation values. The value will be transmitted to the note that is triggered from this step in the sequence. And so another thing you can do is you can use the second row of knobs in the ARP and step sequencer. They can be used together, either as arpeggiator modulation 2 or an arpeggiator transpose using the button on the left. So if you actually wanted to, if you click on mod 2 here, it'll change to transpose, and that'll allow you to sort of change the function of the second row a little bit. You can essentially transpose the corresponding step in the sequence in semitones. When you use this with the ARP octaves set to 1 and only 1 key played, this can be used to create custom note sequences, which is pretty cool. And so in order to do this, you just want to make sure that this button is set to transpose. Lastly, for this synth, we have global settings. And so when we go all the way to the top of the synth next to the logo, you're going to notice something, a little drop down, and it says poly. That is your play mode, and you can change your play mode from polyphonic to legato and also retrig. Legato mode, you only have one voice to play with, so this kind of works like a glide. It allows you to sort of glide over to the next note, but you do have to kind of hold it down as you play. Then you have the default mode, which is your polyphonic mode, and it allows you to play up to 24 voices. So this is good for when you're playing chords and multiple notes at once. Lastly, you have your retrig mode, which also features a single voice, but in contrast to the legato mode, the envelopes perform a soft reset when overlapping notes are triggered. In this case, the attack section of the envelopes is not started from 0, but the value it is currently on. This can create a smooth transition between 2 notes. Next to that, you have a unison option here, and you have up to 6 unison voices you can choose from. You could stack them up, and you can also slightly detune them and spread them over the stereo field. And so you have your unison count, which is going to determine how many voices are triggered. Then you have unison detune, which is going to control the amount of detune for the voices in the unison stack. Then you have your unison width, which is going to control the stereo spread of the voices in the unison stack. So having this value at 0 will put all the voices in the center, sort of like in mono. Having the value all the way at 1 is going to put the first voices hard left and the last on hard right. The voices in between are spread linearly in between. On the other side of the logo, you have this tuning drop-down menu, and that refers to your micro tuning. Odin 2 actually supports micro-tuning, and this feature can be used from subtle changes like retuning the instrument to a different bass frequency, or it can completely remap the keyboard. So you could do all kinds of stuff with this if you want. And in the official guide, there's some links and further resources to really help you get more in depth with that as well. And I kind of touched over this in the modulator section video, but I'm just going to go over it one more time. You have your glide knob, which is essentially like the legato, in which it allows you to slide from one note to the next. Then you have your master knob, which is going to control the output gain of the entire synthesizer. That is going to conclude our Odin 2 series, our complete guide. I hope this one was very helpful by now by completing the series. Hopefully this gives you more of a basic understanding of what's going on with this synth and really can allow you to start creating your own sounds and your own libraries. If you like this video, I highly suggest subscribing because I do cover a lot more other synths. And if you have requests for other synths to cover or sounds for like sound design tutorials you want to see and things like that, I am always open to taking requests. You can leave them in the description box below, or you can reach out to me on any of the social media platforms. I have links on my channel. And as always, until next time.